bit of a briefing moving forward into tonight. I'm going to start with a timeline. Well, actually, what I'll do is I'll start by saying this because there's a lot of misunderstanding, I think, in terms of what causes these situations. The police use of force serves as an igniter. There's no doubt, but to an already volatile situation, a volatile mix of urban pathologies, failed urban policy that exacerbates inescapable poverty, failing public schools, inadequate parenting, father-absent homes. We all know when fathers are not around to shape the behavior of young boys, they oftentimes grow up to be unmanageable misfits that the police have to deal with in an aggressive fashion. Pathologies like lifestyle choices, questionable lifestyle choices, gang involvement, drug and alcohol abuse, as well as massive unemployment. Those are the ingredients. Those are the things that cause resentment, anger, and frustration to boil beneath the surface, and then all of a sudden a police situation comes along, and that's why I said it's an igniter, but it's an igniter to an already festering situation. So, you know, this whole last couple of years coming out of Ferguson, there's been a lot of focus on police and police use of force, and that's fine by me. All right, we get our consent from our authority from the consent of the government. If something's bothering them, we should have discussions about it. But this thing has been hijacked for a political and it's a political construct now. I mentioned that 2 years ago. If you want to go back and look at some of the tapes, I said this was a political construct, this whole war on police. And that, in fact, was a war on police that mirrored what had gone on in the 1960s. Same thing, same model, same subversive groups involved with different names now, different generation, of course, as all those folks from the Students for a Democratic Society got old and they're probably senior citizens now and a little tired for this, or tired of it. So I was acutely aware of what was going on and exposed it as such. So we get into what happened last night. You all received a briefing from the Milwaukee Police Department this afternoon. Squads made a traffic stop. Occupants got out of the car and confronted the police. At least one was armed. They may both have been armed, but I'm aware that one was armed. And an officer used force, fearing that his life was in danger, and it's an ongoing investigation, and that'll sort itself out as time moves forward. And then late last night, some of the residual effect of the thing that I opened up talking about, the anger, the resentment, the frustration in people boiled over, and we had an untenable situation in Milwaukee. I've made it clear as it related to the riots of Ferguson and of Baltimore that people have to find a more socially acceptable way to deal with their frustration, their anger, and their resentment. Right? This is an orderly society. We have processes, we have institutions with which to deal with these things. And as frustrating as it can be, sometimes it takes a long time to work through the institutions and the processes that we have. It's still what we have to do, because we cannot have the social upheaval, the chaos that we saw last night that frightens good law-abiding people in those neighborhoods. It destroyed businesses where people work, some probably as a means to support their family, and they're going to have to deal with that. But I made it clear this afternoon in some discussions that I have, the goal moving forward is that we cannot have a repeat. I didn't say we wouldn't. I said we cannot have a repeat of what happened last night. Some additional forces have been mobilized and put together. A plan is in place. That plan is fluid. It involves a lot of my resources. I made a call up of all of our personnel this morning to be on standby. They're actually mobilized. You cannot wait too long, as they found out in Ferguson when the mayor put out the call to the governor, and those additional resources never showed up, or showed up late. In Baltimore, the call was never made. I have an obligation, folks, under the state statutes. I also have an obligation under the the oath that I took to preserve and protect life and property. All right, that's job one. And to the extent that I have that responsibility, I have to have resources, and I have to make sure that the people that I put in harm's way, like I did last night, like I'll do when these situations arise, that they have the resources necessary to complete the mission. All right, what's the mission? Job one, preservation of life and property. It's a pretty clear mission. So you apply your resources to do that, and you go back, you reassess, hopefully a minimal amount of damage, minimal life or injury, I should say, to life, and hopefully, so far it's been the case after last night, other than the officer use of force, nobody else killed. But I think it's important to point out as well, because we tend to gloss over this stuff. We keep focusing on the police. We keep focusing on the police. And I've said publicly before, stop trying to fix the police, fix the ghetto. And I talked about those urban pathologies that have to be addressed to shrink the size of the underclass. We've had the growth of an underclass here in Milwaukee. We saw some of their behaviors on display last night. So you shrink the size of the underclass. How do you do that? You reduce poverty. You fix the schools. You put people back to work, meaningful work. You hold people accountable for effective parenting and some of those lifestyle choices, which sometimes means if they're going to go out and engage in certain behaviors that society says we're not going to put up with, then there have to be sanctions, and that's where the criminal justice system comes in. That's where the prosecutor's office comes in. And as I look around, just about everybody in this room has heard me over the last 5 years, minimum, talking about the role of the criminal justice system, the prosecutor's office, the sentencing practices in this area in Milwaukee County. And I don't know, I guess people didn't think it played a big role, but we're seeing it now. Not just last night, but we're seeing it time and time again. When some individual goes out and does something heinous, we look and they have a long, lengthy criminal history that nobody applied any sanctions to, or any meaningful sanctions, let's put it that way. Maybe some sanctions, slap on the wrist is a sanction, but that's not meaningful. So as I look at the two individuals involved in the traffic stop last night, I have their criminal histories in front of me. We will provide their booking photos later on. Fran will put that out. But as I look, the individual who lost his life, "13 arrests, some serious stuff, recklessly endangering safety, the felony, first degree, felony, dismissed." I don't know why, I don't have the reason, but somebody, it isn't going to be me. I guess if you all have an interest, you'll go back and start peeling back the layers to find out what happened. Sometimes this is no fault of the prosecutor. If you can't get, or she can't get the witnesses to cooperate, I understand that. But that tells the individual who was involved in it that not much is going to happen, and they tend to repeat the behavior. That's how human behavior works. You punish unwanted behavior, you'll see less of it. You do nothing about unwanted behavior, you're going to see a repeat and more of it. It's got a bunch of drug arrests here. Robbery, use of force, no prosecution. I don't know why. I'm not going to blast the prosecutor's office at this point. However, somebody ought to go back and look and see why. There has to be a reason. That's called accountability. If the DA says, hey, we tried, the victims bailed on us, I get that. But if this is one of these second chance, deferred, those are the sorts of things I think that are having a detrimental effect to this community. The second guy, the guy who lived, who's in custody now, possession of a dangerous weapon under 18, dismissed. Some drug dealing. 2-year probation, interlock system, time served, 12 days. It's pretty light sanctions. 2 counts of bail jumping. 2 years probation, time served, 45 days. Another possession of cocaine, probation violations. He's on probation. That means he's been given his chance. In one of these earlier arrests, he's been given his chance. Son, we're going to put you on probation. We're going to give you a chance. You got to walk the straight and narrow. He does not walk the straight and narrow. Gets arrested several times for probation violation. He gets time served 30 days, time served 45 days. It's why we continue to see the behavior repeated. I'm going to go through the timeline here quickly from Saturday to Sunday, August 13th to 14th, starting at 7:16 p.m. last night. MPD inspector on the scene, area 44 an hour, requested MCSO supervisor. MCSO is Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office. 8:35, shot spotter alert, 41st and right, shots fired. 8:47, MPD called, shots fired east of Sherman. 9 o'clock, MCS squads begin responding to Sherman Park area to meet at the playground to mobilize and marshal our forces. 9:03, MCSO squads advised to stage at Washington Park and await orders. So we had 2 locations that we marshaled these resources, and that's in case something happens at one. They're not all tied up and you can't get them out of there. 9:12, MPD reports about 200 subjects in the area, 42nd an hour, possibly to march. 9:15, MPD reports subjects beginning to face police trying to incite the crowd. 9:18, MPD reports subjects breaking up chunks of concrete, begin to throw toward police officers. 9:21, per squad 700, that would be our commander on the scene at the time, squad 700. He makes the decision that all patrol and airport deputies be extended, meaning even though the shift's over, 10 o'clock, they got to stay. 9:22, a command post is established at Midtown Shopping Center. 9:30, MPD requests the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office Bearcat to meet at District 7 for deployment. 9:41, reports of multiple shots fired in the area of Sherman and Burleigh. 9:44, approximately 100 to 150 subjects looting at the BP station Sherman and Burleigh. 9:53, BP station fully engulfed in flames. However, MPD cannot respond due to the area still being a hot zone, meaning there's gunshots, or at least the sound of gunshots in the area. They don't have that kind of protective gear, by the way, firefighters. 10:04, MPD requesting additional officers, large crowds throwing rocks at 44th and Burleigh. 10:06, due to large crowds, rocks being thrown and shots fired, MPD and MPS squads begin falling back to rally at a safe location, redeploy. 10:12, MCSO squad 216 hit by a brick, passenger side front window smashed. 10:14, Waukesha County Bearcat requested. 10:26, staging area established at the corner of Roosevelt and Fond du Lac. 10:36, squad 700, our commander on the scene, orders all available MCSO squads to assist MPD with forming arrest teams behind a skirmish line. Mobile jail is also in the area. That would be our mobile jail. 10:39, reports of light poles being knocked down, Sherman and Burleigh. 10:45, MPD, MCSO arrive, Sherman and Burleigh begin ordering subjects to disperse. 100 people reported in the area. BP gas station almost completely burned down. 10:46 to 11:16, several reports of throwing rocks and random shots fired in several areas around Sherman and Burleigh. 11:02, MPD requests Racine and Walworth County Bearcats. 11:15, State Patrol takes over patrol of the Milwaukee County freeway system. That's because we called all of those squads in to assist in the hot zone, and I want to thank the state, the commander of the superintendent of the State Patrol for doing that for us. 11:16, MPD MCSO skirmish line begins moving toward the area of Sherman and Burleigh. Approximately 11:30, officers at CP Midtown begin hearing random shots fired in the area. Midtown security reports subjects made verbal threats to come to the area of the CP and shoot it up. Again, there's another example of why we deploy in several areas. 11:37, MPD requests MCSO SWAT call up. That would be ours. 11:46, MPD MCSO Skirmish line begins clearing the area of Sherman and Burleigh, 12:02, so now we're into Sunday morning after midnight. The intersection of Sherman and Burleigh is secured. However, several areas still reporting large groups throwing rocks. 12:02, MFD reported several garage dumpster and structure fires in the area. Cannot respond without a PD escort, police department escort. 12:09, reports of shots fired, 53rd and Fond du Lac near the CP, which is the command post. 12:35, fire reported at the playground in Sherman Park. 12:51, MPD reports they will begin going mobile to address sporadic crowds in the area of Fond du Lac and 35th. MCSO squads report back to Roosevelt and Fond du Lac to go mobile. 12:55, MPD requests MCSO SWAT team take position on rooftops around the command post. 101, Milwaukee Fire Department begins requesting Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office to have escorts in responding to the hot zone per 700. That's our commander at the scene. One deputy was staged in a fire rig, one deputy following the rig in a squad, so that the fire department could get to these scenes with some sort of cover. 119, per social media, subjects listening to MPD, MCSO radio chatter on F2 and reporting it. 700 orders all radio communication off of F2. F2 would be the frequency that they were we were doing our communicating on. 143, MPD requests medical for police canine dog bite. 3 subjects caught burglarizing a liquor store, 36th and Burleigh. 1 suspect received a dog bite. 145, Squad 700, the commander orders deputies to remain in Sherman Park to keep it secured. 145, 700 orders additional deputies to return to the command post to stand by and assist Milwaukee Fire if needed. 145, we're talking AM now. Per 700, the commander, all deputies at Sherman Park are to return to Roosevelt and Fond du Lac for further deployment. 2 a.m. to 3:30, MFD Fire Department requests escorts to several medical and fire calls in the area around Sherman Park. 3:30 a.m., MPD reporting most crowds are fully dispersed. Squad 700, our commander orders all second shift airport deputies can return to the airport and stand down. 700 orders the third shift patrol to head to their normal assignments. 700 thanks State Patrol for their assistance. At 4 a.m., Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office SWAT rescue teams return to the command post. At 4:30 a.m., 700 advises MFD Fire Department that due to Milwaukee Police having new and available resources, he'll be removing deputies from the fire rigs escorts as soon as they return. At 4:45 a.m., SWAT teams on rooftops are cleared. 5 a.m., MPD requests use of a Bearcat and resources at Sherman Park for the afternoon, evening of 8/14 of 2016. It's today. 5:30, 700 clears the command post. 8:14, Sheriff Clarke calls Governor Scott Walker to request the mobilization of the National Guard. 8:15, Sheriff Clarke calls Major General Donald Dunbar about the National Guard mobilization. And at 9 o'clock, I called Mayor Barrett regarding the National Guard request and asked what else they had in mind for today and tonight and moving forward. So you can see it was a very dynamic situation for everybody involved. Fortunately, like I said, the loss of life of innocent civilians and law enforcement personnel did not happen. I think only by the grace of God. Bullets are flying all over the place. We saw what happens when bullets are flying all over when Zalea Jenkins is sitting inside her house. It's got to be just a horrible, anxiety-filled situation for all the law-abiding people that live in those areas. That's my first concern. That's the duty that I have, to preserve and protect life and property. The business owners are counting on it, and everybody in Milwaukee County, whether you live in Milwaukee or not, has a vested interest that the city of Milwaukee not burn down like Ferguson and Baltimore, Maryland. I was kept appraised. I was out of town. I was kept appraised. I was in Wisconsin, but out of town. Was kept appraised of what was going on minute by minute with Inspector Schmidt sitting over behind the room. And I made the decision early this morning to make sure that we do not have a repeat of as happened last night. The resources are taxed. Calls for service start to back up, serious calls for service. And part of that responsibility that I have is to make sure that the resources are in place. Okay, we can't wait for resources to be mobilized. I've had discussions with General Dunbar in the past, and he reminds me, he says, Sheriff, we're not the Minutemen. You need us, you have to give us some time to mobilize. I understand that. And so I made the call this morning, first talking to Governor Walker, briefed him, explained the situation, and requested his order. Only he can order them out, but I said we need them. There is a state statute that covers the power of the sheriff, peacemaking powers, in terms of the National Guard.
Sheriff, can I ask you about that, the decision to mobilize?
Yes.
So you made the first call to the governor and then to the National Guard. Is it your understanding that you want them just in the area, or do you wish that they were actually more involved and more engaged in the efforts that you need to do to keep the city safe, the county safe tonight?
No. First of all, civilians don't direct National Guard resources. That's a military. So the military commander, I leave those decisions to the military commander. General Dunbar and I, this isn't the first time we've done this. You know that. Back December, did the same thing, so this is not unfamiliar to me, to what's required. As a matter of fact, the law says 32939, Department of Military Affairs, call to state active duty. Under sub 1, the governor may order into state active duty members of the National Guard under the following circumstances. Number 1, in the case of war, insurrection, rebellion, riot, invasion, terrorism, blah, blah, blah. Number 2, in the event of public disaster resulting from floods, fires, tornadoes, or other natural disaster. Number 3, if the governor declares a state of emergency relating to public health. Number 4, in order to assess damage of potential damage and to recommend responsive action as a result of an event in the listed in subs 1 to 3 that I just read. And here's the important one for me. Number 5, upon application of any marshal of the United States, the president of any village, the mayor of any city, the chairperson of any town, or any sheriff in the state. So I do have the authority to call the governor and request those resources. I did it because we're, like I said, I cannot emphasize this enough. All right, I can't guarantee what's going to happen tonight, but I said we cannot have a repeat.
Now, you called...
Well, just hold on. So, knowing these resources, and to answer your question directly, they're not, the military does not perform a law enforcement function. Okay, the military acts as a force multiplier to certain things that the General Dunbar will determine.
Fix the ghetto. That was a very eloquent and detailed response by Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clare that we've been listening to, going through a litany of societal problems that have led to some of the unrest and violence that we have seen in the aftermath of some of these police shootings, pointing out that the suspect in this one in Milwaukee last night, 23-year-old Seville Smith, had a lengthy arrest record, 13 arrests, including some felony accounts, some that were dismissed, and the man that Seville Smith was with in that car when the shooting happened also has a lengthy arrest record and was on probation. The police officer involved in the shooting, we were told, African-American, and police certainly showing a great resolve as well as restraint. Last night, we were told earlier, they did not fire one shot, they did not use any force, yet the authorities said there were 48 shots fired in that crowd of people when they were rioting. And Arthel, you have to wonder that if there was a dead cop that we would be mourning right now, is if some of those folks were out there in Milwaukee last night causing such destruction and damage, if they would show up at a vigil, a candlelight vigil for a police officer slain in the line of duty, as sad as any loss of life is. But clearly, Sheriff Clarke just saying he cannot guarantee what can happen tonight. National Guard on standby, basically, not deployed, as sunset in Milwaukee is about 2.5 hours from now.
Yes, 6 buildings burned down last night. The sheriff saying that people have to figure out a way to deal with their own anger and frustration, that social upheaval is unacceptable. And as Eric pointed out at the beginning of his statements, the sheriff basically highlighting a social spectrum and systemic issues that boil down to what the sheriff called, quote, a festering situation. Everything from the poor education system, single parent homes, and poor personal choices. A very exhausted and depleted Sheriff Clarke, not wanting to see such repetition without solutions.
Certainly hope there is calm tonight. Authorities trying to get that message out to the people in Milwaukee. Earlier, the mayor saying that if you have a young person in your home in Milwaukee, keep them home. Hopefully it will be quiet tonight. We'll stay on the story here on the Fox News Channel.
And we'll be right back.